saying, yeah, for,
That's what we would do.
yeah, right. And they're talking with each of us, if they're in the 50 or something like that.
Call this meeting to order. Mary, throw.
Yes.
Thompson.
Here.
Howard.
Here.
Harris.
Yep.
Garcia.
Please join me in pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody present for the 2021 budget presentation. Welcome our listeners on YouTube as well. I'm going to turn the budget over to our city manager, Andrew.
Break from the dais this evening. As many of you, as all of you are aware, the preparation and presentation of the annual budget is one of the most important things a city manager does for the commission and for the city of Goodland. This is a process that takes endless hours of preparation and coordination, both between city staff, city commission, and management to be able to pull off. It is a significant amount of work, and as you know, 2020 was a challenging year for everyone, and the city is not immune to those challenges. As such, I really would like to commend the staff and again the commission and what we all did as an organization to be able to navigate the challenges that we've had this year. Similarly, 2021 provides a great deal of uncertainty, and that uncertainty is reflected in this budget. It is a challenge to put together a budget and present a budget in June that does not go into effect until January 1 of 2021. So we do not have all the answers in this budget, but we have operated with the best knowledge that we have, and the best understandings that we were able to compile for you. So a brief roadmap of what we will cover this evening. First, we are going to review the different city funds and functions. This is always a good opportunity annually to not only go through and talk about the numbers of the budget, but also to talk about the context behind the different funds and what each fund kind of has the purpose of doing. Once we get through that, we will go over some budget highlights, what we accomplished in 2020 or are set to accomplish, as again, we are here only halfway through the year. We'll then go through the 2021 budget timeline and the overview of the budget being presented before you this evening. After the overview, we will talk about the revenue analysis and projections that have been accomplished, and then talk about the expenditures broken down by different fund and department. So first, a review of the city budget from a general context. The city has 6 different fund types, those being the general fund, the different proprietary funds, the reserve funds, the debt service fund, and the special revenue fund. So the general fund is the chief operating fund for the City of Goodland. It is the quarterback. It gets all the attention in every community. The general fund is the most debated, discussed fund that any city has. It is called the general fund because the revenues are general. They are not dedicated to any specific purpose. So with that being the case, the governing body then determines the expenditures and the departments as set out in the general fund. The general fund, again, has a series of revenues, those being property taxes, sales taxes, franchise fees, court fines, permits and licenses, and then everything but the kitchen sink. The budget in front of you has 30 different revenue line items in the general fund that are active, and I think an additional dozen of inactive revenue line items the city once received revenues in, but do not have revenues in this budget. So we're talking 30 to 40 different line items that make up the general fund revenues. Drilling down into those first two revenues a little bit more, they seem to get the most attention. First one is property taxes. You may also see this referred to as ad valorem taxes. Ad valorem is a Latin phrase meaning according to the value, and that reflects how your property taxes are assessed are according to the value of your property. So property taxes, ad valorem taxes, are calculated in mils. 1 mil is 1/1000th of a dollar or 1/10 of a cent. And the mill rate is the amount of tax payable per dollar of the assessed value of a property. Now, the formula to calculate your property tax rate, shown there on the screen, you take the taxable value divided by 1,000 and then multiply that number by the mill rate. Now, in Kansas, your entire property's value is not taxable. You only have a certain percentage of your property that is taxable value. That varies depending on the use of the property. So for example, in Kansas, only 11.5% of a person's home is taxable value. So the table on the screen demonstrates a few examples of if you have a $50,000 property, only 11.5% of that value is taxable, that being $5,750. That makes the taxable value $5.75 per mil. Similarly, on a $200,000 house, the taxable value is $23,000, and thus a mil is $23. It's important to remember when we talk about property taxes that the city is not the only entity that assesses property taxes in Sherman County. On the screen, you see a breakdown of $1 paid in property taxes, how that dollar is divvied up. City of Goodland there in the middle constitutes 30 cents of that dollar, equal to that of USD 352, and the majority goes to Sherman County at 38 cents on the dollar. Then we have small fractions for Sunflower Extension District and the state of Kansas. Two caveats of note to note here is that this is based on the 2020 budget, not on the 2021 budget, since we don't know what the county's budget or school district budget will be. It's safe to assume that that ratio will change as the county is set to increase their budget by, I believe, 6 mils to pay for the topside manor. So our proportion in relation to those entities will go down. Second thing to note is that of all these taxing entities, the city actually has the smallest tax base. Sherman County, when they levy property taxes, they're levying them against the whole county. City of Goodland only has residents of the City of Goodland. USD 352 is able to tax all residents of the USD 352 school district, which is essentially the size of the county. And then state and Sunflower Extension District also tax the entire county. So the next major item in our general fund revenues are sales tax. Sherman County has a 9% sales tax. What we always say with the City of Goodland is that the city levies a 1/2 cent sales tax. Technically, neither parts of those statements are true because the sales tax that the city receives are actually levied from the Sherman County, the countywide city-county sales tax. And we don't actually get a full half cent. The countywide sales tax is broken down by proportion of the incorporated cities in that county, and then Sherman County gets the remainder. So technically, the city of Goodland only gets 0.473626% sales tax on the dollar. In fact, the only sales tax that the city does levy is a 0.25% sales tax that it began taking on behalf of the school district in 2013. So again, of that 9%, the state of Kansas takes 6.5% right off the top. Of that, then Sherman County takes 2.25%, and in addition to the city-county sales tax, they take 1% for what was a street improvement project. Several years ago, they came together with the city, did some street improvements in the city, but the majority of the cost went to rehabbing Highway 24, and then they take a 0.25% for healthcare, being the Goodland Regional Medical Center. So that, with our school district, 2.25% gets us to the 9% sales tax levied here in the city and county. Now, on top of that 9%, there are also community improvement districts in the city, and there are 3 community improvement districts. A community improvement district, or CID, is a additional sales tax which is levied on a specific district, and those costs go to pay for improvements, infrastructure improvements, recouping capital costs. And they are limited to a maximum of 2% and a lifetime of 22 years. So the table on the right there shows the 3 CIDs that are existing or set to be existing in the city of Goodland. The first being the 25th Street CID, which is installed in 2015. That was followed up by the Holiday Inn Express CID of 2019. And then in January of 2021, the 24/7 Travel Store CID will begin taxing as well. So in those districts, the sales tax is 11%. When it comes to the general fund, there are 15 established departments in the city of Goodland. Those being the general government department, police department, fire, municipal court, animal control, public transportation, building inspection, street and alley, airport, parks, museum, cemetery, economic development, recreation, and pool. Outside of the general fund, the city has 4 proprietary funds. These funds are also referred to as enterprise funds or utility funds. These funds operate like a business, meaning that the fund department provides a service to customers, and customers pay for that service. For example, we provide electricity, customers pay for electricity, water, sewer, and solid waste. So those 4 funds are the electric fund, water fund, sewer fund, and health and sanitation fund. City also has several reserve funds. These are funds set aside to meet future costs or obligations, especially those arising unexpectedly. City has 6 reserve funds. The first 2 you will hear about the most in this budget process, being the Municipal Equipment Reserve Fund, or MRF, the Capital Improvement Reserve Fund, we call SURF, the Grant Improvement Reserve Fund, the Electric Reserve Fund, Water Reserve, and Sewer Reserve. The city has a debt service fund. Governments issuing debt to finance various projects have to be able to pay back that debt. And we are able to raise funds to do that. And the debt service funds are the locations for that debt to be repaid. City has an employee benefits fund. This is a fund which pays for general fund employees and their health insurance, capers, retirement, workers' comp, unemployment, and social security. Important to note is that it is only applicable to the general fund employees. The different proprietary fund employees do pay for those benefits out of their own proprietary fund. City also has several special revenue funds. These are monies which only can be collected and paid for a specific use or project. In our budget, we have the airport fund, the cemetery improvement fund, law enforcement trust, museum endowment, municipal court diversion fund, special highways, and special parks and recreation. Okay, so let's move on to what we have accomplished or are set to accomplish in the current fiscal year 2020 budget. I think it would be hard to say that 2020 would be defined by anything other than COVID-19 and the way that we were challenged with navigating the fiscal impacts, operational impacts of this pandemic. I think we came through exceptionally well. I think our community as a whole has handled this exceptionally well. And I think that that should be considered definitely a budget success as much as an operational success. In addition to that, we're in the waning days of our street project being completed, $2.3 million street improvement project. One of the more popular things the city has done, constantly receiving positive feedback about the new streets and the new infrastructure in our community. In addition, we installed a $300,000 new recreational trail that was funded through the Dane Hansen Foundation. And we have acquired $143,000 worth of new airport land. Set to begin this fall. If timelines hold, we will be starting the Phase A of our Taxiway B reconstruction project at the Goodland Airport. We have our $8,000 commission live streaming equipment, which has allowed this meeting to be broadcast online, and obviously many other meetings and other purposes as well. And then we are looking also in kind of the fall winter time frame to do the museum renovation of the frontage. So our 2021 budget calendar, we are here on June 22nd doing the budget presentation as signified in yellow. But as I had mentioned in my opening remarks, it was a process to get to this point. Actually, no city commission has received a budget presentation this early in the budget process as you all have now. So that poses some challenges and obviously some benefits. It has given you all the additional time to receive the budget and discuss the budget, but it also has put, poses a number of challenges for staff to be able to not only put together the legwork to get you the budget, but also how we project revenues, things like that. In only a couple more weeks, I mean, obviously every day that passes when you're projecting 6 months out, every additional day you have gives you a better understanding of what your fiscal situation is. So the earlier you move that up does pose some challenges when it comes to budget forecasting and trying to put the most accurate numbers together. This process technically started in March with kind of the administrative side of preparing the documents, but really in April we distributed these budget worksheets and CID forms to department heads, had those come back in May, so departments get a little over a month with those documents. Then Mary and I sit down with the department heads and go over their budget requests, talk about what their needs are. Obviously, at our June 1st meeting, we had a discussion with commissioners about your priorities for this budget and what you wanted to see carried out. That Friday, we received our preliminary valuations from the county. And so where we go from here is we have budget workshops scheduled on the 6th and 20th of July. Our ideal, what we have typically done in the past, is have the commission approve the budget the first meeting in August. So operating under that timeline, we would need to make a determination by July 21st so that we can publish the budget in the newspaper 10 days before the budget hearing on August 3rd and approve the budget on August 3rd. The budget has to be certified by the 25th of August, and there has to be 10 days between certification and the public hearing. So if we don't make that August 3rd regular meeting, we will have to call a special meeting and notice that so that we can adopt the budget at a special meeting. Okay, so now we'll get into our 2021 budget that is before you this evening. The budget we are presenting does not have a tax increase. We keep the mill levy consistent. It does have funding for the $3.4 million reconstruction and lengthening of runway 523. That will be the biggest infrastructure project in this county in a long time. I can't exactly say how long, but that will be a major cost and a major project for this community. We have budgeted the $10,000 home rehabilitation program that has been discussed in commission, and $30,000 new funding for street maintenance. In addition, we have $13,000 budgeted for new funding for IT infrastructure. This has been a challenge for us in years past in that the IT department doesn't really have a department budget. And so the IT expenses are relegated basically to each department and to each fund. Where that poses challenges is that there are IT infrastructure items that overlap the departments. And so getting everybody on the same page, getting them all to consistently fund the IT needs has been a challenge. And we rectify that challenge starting with this budget. In addition, another commission priority item was to begin funding for airport projects, starting to levy again in the airport fund. And we have $26,383 in that fund to do so. As I had mentioned, we've got a series of new additions to this budget, and we cannot add new expenses really without finding different places to cut. And so this budget does include the elimination of 3.5 jobs with the city. It does also include a 4% employee contribution to health insurance premiums. That was another thing commission had identified. It has a 20% increase to health insurance budgeted and a 48 cents an hour raise for employees to hopefully offset that employee contribution. So the screen before you is a breakdown of the mills for budget year 2021. It's technically a budget decrease in that we are seeking to levy 50.108 mills as opposed to last year's or this year's 50.109. And the property tax summary there is broken down by the different funds and what they will be levying. 22.5 mils in the general fund, 7.7 in the debt service, 12.9 in employee benefits, 0.77 in the airport, 4.9 for the library, and 1.3 for library employee benefits. So how do we get to this mill rate or this proposed valuation? We have received budget figures from the county as what our FY 2021 valuations will be. The property tax valuation in Goodland does continue to increase, which is a very good thing for us. The proposed valuation or the total valuation in Goodland for 2021 is $34,218,288. $204. That is an increase from last year's valuation of 33.193. And you can see from the table there that we have consistently risen, albeit moderately, dating back to 2010, when a mill, excuse me, when the valuation was $24,970,000. Our sales tax through the month of May are strong. Our sales tax has weathered this to date pretty well. We are up $12,000 over where we were in 2019. School district sales tax is there in purple, and then you see the CID funds and what they have raised so far in this year. The Holiday Inn Express CID has only received one. This is the first year that CID has come on, so that is $22,000 generated so far this year in that CID.
So would you say that sales tax would probably have increased because of the amount of expenditure that took place? I mean, people spend a lot of money in February, March, April, so that would be a reflection of that.
I think it has what we had said too is that we had a very strong holiday season of 2019, which actually boosted these numbers as well. I think that, to some extent that's true. It's just hard to say right now. I think that's what we're anticipating, that the sales tax will have some plateauing or some falling off there. But right now it's holding strong, and obviously the next couple weeks we should have more information on the June disbursement of sales tax, which will help us figure out kind of what went on in April. So again, the sales tax figures that we have lag by basically 2 months. So what you see through May is what we saw through March. Okay, our franchise fees. These are the fees that the various proprietary funds pay into the general fund for use of city right-of-way and city infrastructure. See, we don't have many changes to those funds. Electric, water, sewer, those are all kind of held consistent in this budget. So here is a breakdown of the general fund revenues and how, what proportions of different revenues make up the general fund. I think as a commission, you should feel very good about this chart because you see some pretty sizable balanced chunks there. The city is not heavily reliant on any one particular revenue source. It is a breakdown of property taxes, franchise fees, and sales tax, and all those other things. So we have a very well-balanced general fund, which helps us when trying to weather storms that impact us, as we had to this year. We'll get to the other funds obviously later in the presentation, but I like to show where the general fund stacks up compared to our other funds, or particularly our proprietary funds. Obviously, electric is the big fund in the city. That is a big revenue item. It is also a big expense item for us. So the general fund makes up about 26%, and the electric fund 56% when it comes to just those items. Okay, so looking at the general fund and some selected revenues, what you have up there are the sales tax and property taxes for 2021. We are looking at about $3.02 million in revenues budgeted for the next fiscal year. Before we get to the different departments and their expenditures, I do also like to remind commissioners of this expense, which is the Neighborhood Revitalization Program. This is a partnership between the city, the county, and the school district, and all three entities forego or rebate property taxes back to individuals in the NRP program. Individuals in that program apply for rebates on improvements to property that they, when they make new developments or do an addition onto a residential or commercial building in the city. So this is a rebate of their property taxes, and that does come at a cost to the city. Obviously, it comes at a benefit as well if you're encouraging people to develop and trying to not burden them with additional property taxes. But the city ends up rebating about 3 mils worth of property taxes. And in 2021, that amount is approximately $96,000. Okay. So we'll get into our general fund departments. Are there any questions on revenues or anything we've covered so far?
Just on the overview, what were the 3.5 positions that were eliminated? Where were those from? I assume ED was one.
Yes, so
Where
we
were
will.
the other two?
So so the economic development director position is eliminated in this budget. Obviously, we have economic development funding, but I think the way the structure is right now, the ED director will not be a city employee is the way that we're proceeding. So that is a budget, an employment elimination. The second position eliminated is a maintenance and janitorial position in our general government. The third is actually our public works director, Rich, is set to retire this fall. And so we will not be filling his position. And then the 0.5 is a part-time police department employee or a part-time police department position that has not been filled in past budgets. And so that position is also eliminated.
As far as the raise going with the 48 cents, it's kind of, I know we kind of done percentages in the past. I know we tried to not do a percentage last time just to get it to go through, but so going with the 48 cents, depending on what wage you're looking at, am I right about 2.5 to 4.5% increase depending
Sure.
on the hourly wage? If we
Right, it depends on the hourly wage. The 48 cents equals out to about $1,000 per employee. It's kind of the way we looked at it, which is an offset of that 4% contribution. So what we looked at is that basically an employee with a family plan contributing 4% to their health insurance premium will contribute about $1,000. I know that the commissioners had said that when looking at the employee contributions, we wanted to have kind of an offsetting raise when we looked at that, so employees didn't take a pay cut. And so what that does is any employee with a family plan basically has a flat year. They don't have a pay cut, but they don't necessarily have a raise because there is that increase. An employee that does have a single plan would contribute about $500. So if you do have a single plan, there is kind of the added benefit of you have a raise this next year as well, because that additional $500 is not going towards your health insurance. It is going just to your wage. And we'll talk more about that as we kind of get into some of these funds and departments. Okay. So as you see on the presentation slides, the block in the top right corner has a corresponding number. That number relates to a page in your budget book. So as we go along, that is the page reference. It references the start of that department's page in your budget books. Okay, so the general fund, or the general government department, handles administration and financial management for the city. It has elected official salaries and general operations and special projects and donations that the city issues. Personnel in this department are the city commissioner and mayor salaries, the city manager, the city clerk, 1/4 of the IT director, and 1 administrative assistant. As I mentioned earlier, this does include the elimination of 1 full-time maintenance janitorial position. Facilities that you may see expending under this department or maintaining are City Hall and the Carnegie Arts Center. Obviously, City Hall is kind of the central administration offices. The city also owns the Carnegie Arts Center and leases it to them at essentially no cost. Some notable contracts and expenses in this department. City attorney is $48,000. The cost of updating our codes annually comes to about $8,000. The maintenance of the City Hall elevator and the Arts Center elevator, and then the donations the city makes to the Freedom Festival, to the Northwest Tech Scholarships, and to the Flatlander Festival. There are 3 transfers to reserve funds that come out of this department, one being the dispatch remodel that the city completed this last year. The city did not have the funds to do that remodel, so they borrowed from the reserve fund and are set to pay that back over a series of 10 years. The maintenance reserve, that's just what we put back towards when there are issues at City Hall, and then putting away for when the administration vehicle cycles out. Any questions on general government? Yeah, there's the expense overview for general government. This department is set to spend less in 2021 than it did in 2020. Again, we are budgeting $830,921 in FY21 as opposed to $874,000 the previous year. Okay. Next is the police department. Obviously, it's a public safety and law enforcement agency responsible for crisis response, patrol, traffic canine, records and evidence, investigations, and enforcement of municipal ordinances. Personnel in this department include the chief of police, 8 police officers, 1 records clerk, and 1 part-time administrative assistant. As I mentioned earlier, this does include the elimination of 1 part-time police officer position in 2021. Facilities included in this fund are the police station on Armory Road. Notable contracts and expenses for the police department. We have Interpol, which is the PD records management system, and SceneDoc, which is their program for being able to issue tickets. Capital outlay include a police vehicle as we cycle through police vehicles, and the TASER program, which is a contractual cycling of tasers for our law enforcement personnel. Transfers out of this fund include the police station facility reserve, roof replacement for the police station, the bulletproof vest program, computer upgrades, police car equipment upgrades, the K9 program, radio replacements, and the IT backbone. Again, displayed is the budget for PD in 2021. We do have this fund expending $830,921. That is a decrease in funding from FY 2020 when the police department was funded at $874,000. those numbers actually aren't right on the presentation. Sorry, the police department is actually set to expend $605,577, which is a decrease from $616,000. I do apologize, but the correct figures are on page 9 in your budget book. Are there any? Yes, that's correct. So, oop. There we go. Doesn't show up. Yep. So the transfer lines where that got mixed up. Are there any questions on police department? Okay, municipal court. City of Goodland has a limited jurisdictional court, which authorized under city ordinance adjudicates violations of city code. The municipal court administers court proceedings, docketing, and court matters, keeping all records of the court. Personnel are one municipal court clerk judge, and this position operates out of City Hall, so they have no facilities other than office. Okay, our municipal court has the cost for the court software, prisoner care, if someone is placed in jail because they're adjudicated under municipal court, we do have a cost associated with that. And then indigent defense, if someone does not have the ability to defend themselves in municipal court, we do provide for representation. Capital outlay, none. Transfers, none. Municipal court department is set to expend $80,763 in 2021. Again, a decrease from $81,374 in FY 2020. Are there any questions on municipal court? Animal control. The Animal Control Department handles violations of city code pertaining to animals, responds to animal at large matters, performs pit bull registrations, and assists with pet licensing. The city does contract out its animal control service, so we do not have personnel. We do not have facilities. The Paw Wash Kathy Schermerhorn contract is the predominant makeup of this department. Those services are both for the animal control services and the animal shelter services. So they are, she is required to provide a certain number of spaces in the animal shelter for the dog and cat pound. And we do have animal medical treatment expenses that come out of this, including euthanasia when animals have to be put down. But they do not have any capital outlay or transfers. The animal control budget for 2021 is pretty consistent with 2020. That fund is set to expend $49,750 as opposed to $49,850 last year. Commissioners have any questions on animal control? Okay, public transportation. So the city does operate a charge basis public transportation van funded through an 80-20 partnership with the Kansas Department of Transportation and the federal government. City does employ 2 part-time van drivers. There are no facilities associated with public transportation. The costs are pretty straightforward. So I don't have anything necessarily to bring your attention to in this department. We are setting capital outlay for computer and a transfer for the city share of van replacement and the IT backbone. So when the city has to replace its van, we are responsible for 20% of that cost, and then KDOT pays 80% of that new van. Are there any questions on public transportation? That department is set to expend $36,824, as you can see in your budget overview, a decrease from $37,316 in FY 2020. So the fire department is responsible for providing fire safety, fire suppression, and emergency services, the purpose of protecting life and property in the community. This department is an example of why the city authorizes expenditures and not line items, because as we all know, this budget could potentially never go into effect for the fire department as we continue to work towards the city-county merger. All of the line items budgeted here could just turn into a contractual line item that are paid to the county, right? So we don't have anything solidifying the merger at this time, so we continue to budget the department as if it will continue to be a city department in FY 2021. So the personnel in this department include the fire chief and obviously dozens of paid per call firefighters. Firefighters are paid $26 per run, and then they get $10 an hour after the call exceeds 3 hours. Facilities include the Wolock building just north of City Hall, and then the fire department also has use of 2 of the 3 bays that are attached to the city building. We have no real notable contracts or expenses. Capital outlay for SCBA tank replacements is budgeted at $7,000. And then obviously the big one for any fire department is the equipment, is the apparatus. So we have a $35 fire apparatus, command vehicle, $10,000, fire equipment, $6,000, bunker gear, $6,000. Does also include the training facility, which was established a little over a year ago east of the police station on Armory Road. The fire department has been using that site for training operations, and that is budgeted for $5,000, and then the IT backbone at $1,000. Like the other departments, the fire department does have a decrease in 2021 expenditures, $233,649 set to be expended in 2021, as opposed to $238,398 in FY20. Commissioners have any questions on the fire department budget? Okay. The general fund's building inspection department. This department conducts plan checks, issues building permits, inspects residential, commercial, and industrial structures. Staff enforces building and zoning codes, investigates and responds to building and zoning complaints and violations. Personnel in this department are 1 code enforcement officer, and there are no facilities. Expenses in this department, we've got nuisance abatements, which include unfit structure demolition at $39,000. We have the housing rehabilitation program at $10,000, and we have mowing abatement at $6,500. In addition, we have capital outlay. We do not have capital outlay, but we have the IT backbone transfer to MRF. Are there any questions on building inspection? That department is funded at $233,649. I wonder if I did that again. So that department is actually funded at $105,286, a slight decrease from $106,486 prior.
You say 105?
Yes, 105,286.
Was revised, yeah, 106 your budget for 2020 revised was 87,000, so at 105
Correct.
instead of 106.
2021.
So, yes, so 106,000 was budgeted in 2020. As we went through the budget year, we revised everyone's budget down to eliminate expenses. And then we're set to budget 105,000 in FY '21. Okay, our street and alley department is responsible for the maintenance of city streets and alleyways, snow removal, street sweeping. This department also assists with vehicle and equipment mechanical repairs and the construction of new roadways and capital projects. Personnel in this department are 1 street foreman, 1 mechanic, 6 laborers, and 2 seasonal positions. As I noted, we do have the elimination of 1 full-time public works director in 2021, half of which is funded in street and alley. The other half is funded in the water department. Facilities for street and alley are the city shop. Notable contracts and expenses are bulk fuel purchases. This is something Commission has looked at in years past. Equipment maintenance, $45,000. Operating supplies, $65,000. So obviously to maintain our streets and to provide for the equipment to maintain those streets takes a lot of materials, takes a lot of fuel. Capital outlay, we have a valley gutter repair, doing about 1 of those a year, as well as an alley repair, doing 1 of those a year as well. And transfers, similarly, the street and alley department has a lot of equipment, and thus they have a lot of transfers. So the city shop's roof replacement, crushing of concrete, additional chip sealing, that is something the commission had again prioritized. We do have $30,000 to put in the street maintenance, additional to what we take out of special highways. Other equipment to be replaced, we have tow behind mower, tandem axle truck, 2 riding mowers, front end loader, street sweeper, and the IT backbone. This department does see an increase in funding in FY '21. This expenditure is total expenditure $743,470, which is an increase from the previous year's $739,780. Are there any questions on street and alley? Okay, the general fund airport. This is funding in the airport department for the maintenance, upkeep, and operations of Goodland Municipal Airport Renner Field. Major airport projects are not budgeted out of the airport department in the general fund, but are actually out of the airport fund, which is a standalone fund as we discussed. So we don't see the mill levy, we don't see the projects coming out of this fund. I serve as the airport manager for the city, so we do not have any personnel in this department. Obviously, the facilities at the airport include the airport terminal, the community hangar, the T hangars, and the airport firehouse. Notable contracts and expenses. The biggest expense actually in this is property taxes. Because the city rents the T hangars at the airport, we are required to pay property taxes on those facilities. And we pay approximately $23,000 worth of property taxes each year to the county. Obviously, as we've shown with the breakdown of property taxes, the city receives a portion of that back. But we do have to pay property taxes on those facilities because they are revenue generating.
How much revenue generate?
So we raised the rental of the T hangars 2 years ago now to $150 per hangar. There are 10 hangars out there. So it is now barely a break-even cost, revenue, but before, when they were $75 hangars, it was a net loss to the city. I'm sorry, what was that?
There's still no penal property to the
No, absolutely not.
side. How was I picked for that?
I remember. So there aren't any transfers out in here. The airport fund essentially stays the same, $46,200 budgeted in 2021 as opposed to $46,250 in 2020. Are there any questions on airport? Okay, the Parks Department provides for groundskeeping, maintenance, upkeep, and operations of city parks and facilities. Parks Department also maintains several city properties not considered public parks. This department includes 1 parks foreman, 2 park laborers, and 2 seasonal positions. Facilities are the city parks building on 18th and Arcade, and then park bathrooms, if you want to call those facilities. There is no, again, I don't have a whole lot to draw your attention to in the Parks Department. There's no capital outlay. Transfers coming out of this department are for a pickup truck replacement, park equipment replacement, the zero-turn mower, and the IT backbone. Parks Department is set to expend $178,982 in FY21. That is an increase over budget in FY20 of $147,996. Are there any questions on parks? Okay, the High Plains Museum is a local history repository that the city owns, representing over 100 years of Northwest Kansas history. The museum provides educational and entertainment content and quality of life programming for visitors of all ages. Personnel in this department are the full-time museum director employed by the city and 2 part-time museum assistants. The facilities under the museum's control are the High Plains Museum and the one-room schoolhouse.
Is it just 2 part-time?
Yes.
3 in the book here.
It should only be 2.
The reason it's 3 is because 2 of them are high school students and Goodwin. They equate to it.
I'm sorry, I was forgetting about Tom. It is 3. Is Tom here? Don't tell him. Okay, yes, 3 part-time assistants. Okay, the museum is again essentially holding the same cost as it did in FY 2020, set to expend $86,846 as opposed to $86,615 in 2020. Are there any questions on museum? Okay, the cemetery provides for the groundskeeping, maintenance, upkeep, and operations of the Goodland Cemetery. Again, the city does not have personnel as we contract out cemetery caretaker and cemetery gravedigger services to private contractors. At the cemetery, we have the cemetery maintenance shop, we have the All Faith Chapel, we have the kiosk. And again, the lion's share of this department is the contract for cemetery caretaker Joni Guyer, and that is budgeted at $44,500 in 2021. There's no capital outlay, and there's IT backbone contribution of $500. The cemetery fund, again, holds steady as to what it was budgeted in FY20, which was $51,400. In 2021 is set to expend $51,950. Does commission have any questions on cemetery? Okay, the Economic Development Department provides assistance and coordination of city resources for developers looking to start or expand businesses in the city of Goodland. Obviously, this is one of the change areas that the city is going through right now, working to collaborate with the county on a new economic development structure. So we do have the elimination of the ED director. Facilities under the purview of this department include the Goodland Welcome Center. So we did set funding for this at $90,000, and we do have that as a professional service or contractual service in FY 2021. We have capital outlay, none, and we have the IT transfers at $1,000. So this department is set to decrease. With that being the case, we have funding at $95,200 in FY 2021, as opposed to $162,730 in 2020. Are there any questions on economic development?
Was that number higher if the county kicks in a portion and we kick in a portion? I was thinking the number was closer to 50. I could be wrong, but I don't remember 90.
I think
Is there-
it's an unknown right now, which is part of the problem. Obviously, we were not funding the economic development department at $100,000. So if the county's only kicking in 50, we're only kicking in 50, it could, I mean, that's kind of a governing body. That's what makes this difficult right now is we're going through the transition in the midst of budget. So I guess I would rather over budget that and have dollars to put towards something else.
I
But
don't know if there's just examples, and I think John Coppola just threw out a number as an example, but
Yeah,
Right.
I think there was a few different numbers that were just kind of tossed out, and then nothing was ever really discussed further with them. I think that's still pretty much up in the air.
so that is, I do think that needs to be something, we've got a joint commission meeting on July 6th. Our budget discussion would then follow that. I think that needs to be something that we figure out at that meeting is what are they thinking and how do we match that?
yeah, okay.
Well, they're gonna have to, of course, see what they bring to the table, because it's gonna be a county position.
Right.
What I understand, or at least they wanted it in our county, they'll be paying the health insurance, the papers, and, coming in benefits, but it is something that we need to have certainly exposed, conversation as to what the expectations is going to be on hiring, so that, but I agree with you, it's better to go high until we find out exactly what we're gonna do.
Sure.
Well, the CDB portion from that revenue can, pay, I don't know, half or whatever
Right.
out of that. So there's a lot to be decided, but I think we're at the, probably the upper end of where we need, I don't see it going higher than that. So.
Yeah, I think that this department is one that's going to particularly need heavy input from you all as commissioners, is what are we funding this program at? So I took an educated guess, I took my best stab at it, but obviously this has got to be something we kind of collaborate on and figure out what we're going to be funding at. Okay. Recreation. So the recreation program is, again, quality of life, recreational programming. The city contracts this service out. We do not have an in-house rec department. We contract with the Goodland Activity Center. They provide our different recreational, athletic, and programming of that nature. Facilities include the Centennial Park ball fields and the ball field buildings. out on the southwestern portion of town. And again, the majority of this department is the contract that we pay to the GAC at $53,000. We do not have capital outlay. We do have ball field, the infield conditioner replacement. That is making sure that the clay and the things out at the ball fields are budgeted for.
Just curious, did they ask for anything more this year?
They did not, no. So we did increase them last year by $4,000, and that wasn't something that we looked at doing this year. And again, we have them under contract for 3 years at this rate now.
Do that currently, okay.
Yes. So this department is flat with what it was last year, $62,500. Are there any additional questions on the rec department? Okay, Waterpark, the pool. Stever Waterpark is a seasonal pool facility providing quality of life recreational enjoyment to the community. The pool obviously employs one seasonal pool director, one assistant director, and dozens of seasonal lifeguards and concession workers, part-time seasonal help. Facilities are the Stever Waterpark. We do not have any notable contracts or expenses or capital outlay that I need to bring your attention to. Transfers out of the pool, the water park, are improvements, pool improvements at $10,000, pool fixture replacements at $10,000, and the IT backbone. So the pool is funded for an increase in FY 2021. That is funded at $147,750. And that is an increase from $138,000 as funded in FY 20. Are there any questions on Stever Waterpark? So that's the general fund. And if you'll see on the screen, the breakdown of where our costs come from out of the general fund. Pie chart's a little bit misleading because it shows general government as our biggest expenditure, but the reality is $300,000 of that in that department are the sales tax that is just a pass-through. City collects it for the school, pays it to the school, so it's not really a cost for us. It's not a revenue for us either, but it does inflate that. Really, our biggest department is the street and alley department. When you take that cost out. So before we move on to the proprietary funds, electric funds, are there any questions on what you've just seen in the general fund, or any questions we can answer? I have our department staff here with us this evening if you have any questions you would like to direct to them as well. Okay, hearing none, we'll keep it rolling. The electric fund, where we are revenues year to date, we have collected 2.9 million revenues, $2.94 million in sales, as opposed to where we were last year, $3.06 million. Again, this presentation was made probably 2 weeks later last year than it is today. So we're basically on course to where we were last year in the electric fund. We will have revenues coming in over these next couple weeks that will put us on par with that. And in addition, last year we actually ended up over budget in revenues for the electric department. I think we were $40,000 over what we had budgeted in revenues. So the electric revenues right now are in a very good place. That is not the total revenues, that is just one line item, but that is the biggest line item, which is the sale of electricity. So revenues are pretty good this year. So this is selected electric fund revenues, which show some of the biggest revenues that we bring in. Again, the sale of electricity. Another big one we've had this year are installation fees and materials. When you have a big project like the new Holiday Inn Express, they get a pretty sizable bill from the electric department from all of the infrastructure we have to put in for that, the transformers, things like that. So there's a big cost and a big revenue there for the city as well. We do project revenues at $6.45 million next year, a slight increase from $6.43 million in this current year. Budgeted, which we did trend down anyway, even though I think we're in a good spot. We did trend down all of our revenues just to make sure that what this unknown is in the next few months is accounted for. Okay, so the electric fund is divided into two departments, or three departments, we should say, but the first being production. So the production department is the City of Goodland's operation, maintenance, monitoring of the Goodland power plant, responsible for the production of electricity, obviously, when it is necessary that the electric department generate. The city right now does not generate full time. The city is still 7 years or is 8 years into a contract with Sunflower Electric, who is our electricity provider. We still have 7 years remaining on that contract. So we buy power from them because it is cheaper to buy the power than it is for us to generate 24/7 and be our own provider. But, you know, when there are outages, when there is our connection to Sunflower Electric severed, that's when our production department steps in and keeps the lights on. So that department consists of half of the public power director's salary and 6 full-time power plant operators. Facility is the Goodland Power Plant for that department. Power purchased is budgeted at $3.5 million in FY 2021. This is the single biggest line item in the City of Goodland budget. It is our single biggest expense. The purchase of that power that we then resell. So, and then we have insurance budgeted at $95,000. I pointed out the insurance cost in our production and distribution line item or funds because I think it is important to give commissioners context that when we have the electrical system, it costs a lot of money to insure those facilities. And when we get to property and casualty insurance renewals, it's often very hard for us to find people willing to bid the city's property and casualty insurance because they don't want to take on the risk of the power plant. So that often limits the pool of bidders that we get when we have insurance because it's an electric department. This is big, expensive, high voltage stuff. And a lot of insurance companies say, I don't want that risk. So the production department does not have any capital outlay scheduled in 2021, does have several transfers, $15,000 to retire, remove an underground tank, the switchgear 3-phase sub project budgeted at, $75,000, a pickup truck at $7,000, the IT backbone, and a transfer to reserves. Production is set to expend $4.46 million in 2021, very much on par with its spending patterns in budget 2020. Again, 4.46. million. Are there any questions on production? We'll go to distribution. So the distribution department is responsible for the city's electric, city's power being distributed through the community, through the various lines and poles and all of the infrastructure that it takes to get the power from A to B. Personnel in this department include half of the the other half of the public power director's salary, and and the 6 line operators. The Goodland Power Plant is again the facilities there. The construction materials and supplies line item, again, when you're talking miles of line, poles that need to stand for 30, 40 years. These are high cost items and these are high expenditures. And then again, insurance at $80,000 as well. Capital outlay for the distribution include electric meters, which we have budgeted at $20,000 to cycle out electric meters. And then we have a myriad of transfers budgeted. The North Loop project rebuild, we have the rebuild of 8th to 10th, an alley rebuild, rebuilding Main Street, 40,000, 7 Mile tie replacement, and excuse me, the South Loop project at 100,000, North Loop is at 20,000. Replacement of units 20, 19, and 41. Replacing the chipper, the IT backbone, and the electric reserves transfer. So the distribution department is set to expend $1.42 million in FY 2021. That is an increase from FY 20, and it's $1.33 million budget. Are there any questions on the distribution side? Okay, commercial in general. This is the department that handles utility billing. It also handles not only the electric department's utility billing, but water and sewer billing. This department includes the quarter of the IT director's salary and then 4 billing office clerks. There are no facilities associated with C&G. Professional services in this line item, or in this fund, are budgeted at $70,000 and postage at $18,000. So in order to get the bills, get the software to read everybody's rates, and then the postage to send that out across the community also carries, a pretty substantial cost. We don't have any capital outlay, and we have 3 transfers, computer upgrades, the holiday directions. These are the lights that you see on Main Street, Highway 24, Highway 27, and the IT backbone. C&G is budgeted at $492,277, an increase from $483,000 in FY 20. Do commissioners have any questions on commercial in general? Okay. Are there any questions on the electric fund or anything that was presented there?
Just had one, fine. A lot of stuff to go through here.
It is.
On the electric distribution, the
So page 48.
yeah. transfer seems to be considerably higher this year.
In regards to just the transfers in general?
Yes,
Or,
okay, we got 100,000 more this year than last year.
yes, so last year when, actually, again, this is why it's hard when we are kind of presenting budget figures. We had to make some cuts in the electric fund, and one of the things that was cut out was the South Loop project. It was substantially reduced. And then I think commissioners felt at that time, thought, oh, well, and I think that was probably a failure on my part of presentation, but commissioners didn't quite realize what the South Loop project was, had some regrets that was cut out of the budget. And so we did move that back into the budget. But, it's just kind of an ebb and flow with the electric fund, and when revenues are down, we've got to make some project cuts and things like that. And then when revenues kind of return, we try to fund those where they need to be funded once again.
And,
Very good, thank you.
Yes. Okay. So the water fund, again, we're sitting pretty well in the water fund through this point right now. We are at $459,000, which is up over where we were this time last year, about on par with where we were 2 years ago. I think obviously with a few more weeks, that's probably the track that we'll be on. And we're getting a lot more water usage this year than we did last year. So our revenues are reflecting that. Obviously, the water revenues have seen better days in 2016 and 2017. So we are projecting revenues in 2021 of 1.126 million. That is a slight decrease in revenues over FY20, where we budgeted $1.128 million in revenues. Obviously, we consistent with our other utility funds, we've trended down our revised budget for 2020. So even though things are looking good right now, we're still kind of trending things down, making sure that we're going to make it through the year well. So the water fund, first department is the production department. Again, the city owns its own water utility. The water production department is responsible for treatment of water and the operation, maintenance, and monitoring of the Goodland water plant. We did get word today that the media for the water treatment plant came in. So for, what was it, two months ago now, we approved that. It's finally arrived. Personnel in this department constitute a quarter of the IT director and one full-time water operator. We do have the elimination of the public works director position in 2021, which was again half funded in street and alley, and then the other half funded in production. Facilities are the Goodland water plant. Chemicals are a big operating cost for the water plant every year. That shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. Transfers in the production department are $20,000 for the water plant update, $5,000 for repainting the water tower, $10,000 for replacing media. So we've started to budget that item separately starting in this next year. Paying back our SRF water payment, and then the IT backbone. The water production department is set to expend $358,577 in 2021. That is a decrease of $507,000 in FY20. Any questions on production? Okay, distribution. So similarly, this is the infrastructure to take the water into the power plant and distribute it out to residents and businesses in the community. Personnel include 1 full-time water utility superintendent and 2 full-time water laborers. They share the facility with the production department. Just like any distribution department, construction materials, professional services, these are, again, miles and miles of water line that are run in the city of Goodland, and the materials to handle those projects and repairs and replacements are significant. The distribution department has funded capital outlay, $10,000 for water meters, $8,000 for a locator, and $10,000 for system improvements. Transfers. In 2016, the city took out a general obligation bond to do over a $2 million water line project. And so those bond payments come out of the water department's revenues. That bond payment does see a pretty significant step up in cost this year from what was paid last year, and it's $268,000. We have water line replacements budgeted at $50,000, Vactron at $12,000, and the IT backbone. Water distribution is set to increase its expenditures this next year at $757,000. Again, the majority of that increase is the GO bond payment that steps up this year, as opposed to $676,000 in 2020. Are there any questions on water distribution? Okay, and then these are the additional transfers that come out of water. The franchise fee, clean water drinking fee, and the comp tax remittance. Okay, we'll move on to sewer fund. So you can see in the city increased and restructured kind of its sewer billing and rate structure. That was such a fantastic thing for the sewer department, because it was really not bringing in the revenues necessary to maintain the infrastructure that we have to. And so we did have to kind of change the rates and go to a flat fee. That has increased our revenues in 2019 and 2020, and obviously makes for a lot more predictable when you have a flat fee structure. You kind of know what you're going to bring in each month. We're at $217,000 this year. Again, we're basically right on par with where we were in 2019. Okay, so our sewer revenues, we do have a projected revenue balance of $477,000 in 2021. We did trend that down a little bit more than some of the other revenues, just as we're kind of getting the better idea of what those revenues are bringing in. So the sewer funds treatment department provides wastewater treatment and disposal services for the city of Goodland. Personnel in the sewer treatment fund include a quarter of the IT director, one full-time sewer treatment operator, and one seasonal employee. The city has the Goodland wastewater treatment plant on the north side of town. Expenses in sewer treatment, lab fees, equipment maintenance. We don't have any capital outlay. Some of the transfers are the riding mower to maintain the premises of the water treatment fund, the IT backbone, and the sewer reserves transfer. So the sewer treatment department is budgeted for $170,214, slight increase from what was budgeted in 2020, $161,000. Are there any questions on treatment? Okay, collection. So sewer collection is responsible for the collection of the wastewater infrastructure. We do have one full-time sewer plant supervisor in the collection department. And again, the facility is the wastewater treatment plant. Contracts and expenses in this department include construction materials and equipment maintenance, capital outlay, a mini excavator is budgeted. That would be shared with the water and sewer department and with the street department to be able to successfully complete some of the projects they have slated. That was originally going to be shared between the water and the sewer department, but we moved it into sewer based on, again, some of the water funds expenses. So sewer liners are budgeted at $20,000 and system improvements are budgeted at $10,000. And then we have lift station upgrades. We budget for things that need to be done to our various lift stations around town. And then a transfer to sewer reserve. Are there any questions on sewer collection? Okay, then the sewer also has its transfer to the general fund and its transfer to C&G to handle the billing. The health and sanitation fund, real quick, the city contracts with In the Can. The city bills on behalf of In the Can, and then the city assesses an administration fee for handling that billing. So we take the revenues brought in, assess our fee, and that's what the city retains. So we are budgeting that being a revenue of $45,637. That is a bit of a decrease from 2020. We just kind of had a bigger beginning fund balance in 2020 that we transferred into the general fund. And once we transferred that in, we just don't have that beginning cash balance there this year. It was only about $5,000. Okay. We'll move on to some of the other funds the city operates. Again, the airport fund. So this is the fund used for raising matching funds for FAA projects. We have a fund balance projected at the end of 21 at 373, or we should say of raising $373,627 in that balance. That comes from the beginning fund balance of $310,000, and then we've got hangar rental income, which generates about $29,000 a year. And this is something that is new to the 2021 budget, is the putting away additional property tax funding for airport projects. This is something Commission indicated as a priority item, something the airport board has advocated the past couple of years as well. So we do have those revenues going from $30,000 to over $50,000 a year if we continue that funding. So, and in 2021, again, we have the big project, the 523 reconstruction. That does end up being around a $3.4 million project. We are what's called a NIPIUS airport, which means we're on the FAA's map. So we're entitled to certain dollars. And with that entitlement comes a 90-10 match from the FAA. And we'll take them for all that it's worth this year because they will be shelling out over $3 million, but we will still be responsible for $335,000 to match that. So that will pretty substantially reduce this fund, obviously, but this is kind of a once in a very long time project as well. So after that, we will begin the process of rebuilding that fund balance up. Okay, the library fund. The city levies on behalf of the Goodland Public Library. The city set out in ordinance that the library may levy a maximum of 6.75 mils. And other than setting that maximum, the city has really no involvement in the library. We say, okay, what you're requesting is within your authority. And similarly to the school district, when those taxes come in, they go to the library. So the library's request in FY 2021 is $167,000 for their operations and then $44,000 for their employee benefits. Those two combined are a mill rate of 6.21, so they're under the threshold as authorized. Okay, the debt service and bond and interest fund. This fund is used again to make principal and interest payments on city debts. The city does have GO bonds to pay from 2017, a series that was taken out 3 years ago for the street project. That is on a bond cycle of 2017 to be paid off 2027. So we'll continue to make payments on that debt. We have a payment to be made of $289,525, and thanks to what we raise, we're only having to authorize $266,000 to make that payment in FY 21 because our fund revenues will be $317,000. I apologize. Ties on too tight. Okay, the Cemetery Improvement Fund. So revenues from lot sales, ossuarium niche sales, burial permits. This has a fund balance of $247,000 slated for 2021, of that only being $9,000 in new revenues. This is another one that builds up very slowly over time. Which 2 years ago, 2019, Cemetery Board did their ossuarium project out of this fund, and that took it down from, it was in the $300,000 range before that project. So some of the expenses that do come out of this are buffalo grass, herbicide, and then if there are fence building improvements to be done out there. We do budget all of those expenses. That does not necessarily mean we will spend $14,000 on fencing in 2021, but we do budget those expenses as things have happened over the years that have caused us to have to fix up the fencing and fix up buildings out there. Okay, the Employee Benefits Fund. This is the city's share of employee benefits for general fund employees. As we had mentioned, these are only for general fund. The proprietary funds come out of their individual funds. So when we were discussing health insurance late 2019, commissioners had indicated an interest in moving the renewal date from March to July, so that would more align with our budget cycle and allow us to better project what our health insurance expenses will be. So the easiest way for us to do that is to, in this next year, award a 16-month contract as opposed to a 12-month contract. That 16-month contract would then get us to a July renewal. Doing so would increase the cost, obviously, as health insurance providers bid on our program. Adding 4 months of coverage, it generates additional uncertainty, so they factor that into their costs. So while we usually budget a 15% increase each year, we did budget a 20% increase so that we can look at that 16-month contract. In addition, one of the items that the Commission indicated interest on was to have employee contributions, and we have budgeted in a 4% employee contribution in this budget. Right now, the city pays 100% of employee premiums, so that would go to a shared cost going forward. And that would again be a 4% contribution for all plan types. I did want to show what those contributions look like. So at the top is what was shown in the budget overview, what we're set to levy for employee benefits. We do have a decrease in the mill levy for employee benefits in 2021, levying only 12.9 mills as opposed to 13.3 year prior. And then that 4% contribution generates those revenues, $28,000 in employee benefits, $13,000 in electric, $3,000 in the water fund, $1,500 in the sewer fund. So that 4% constitutes about $46,971 in employee contributions. Are there any questions on any of those items?
How did we arrive at 4%?
So the 4% keeps the city under the 5% grandfathered. If we went over 5%, we would be committing at this point to go non-grandfathered. And then we looked at the $1,000 raise for employees, and that essentially offsets the 20% increase, and the contribution comes out to being 4%. Any other questions? The Law Enforcement Trust Fund, our revenues from drug forfeitures, vehicles impounded from seizures, and they can only be used for law enforcement purposes. So this is a special revenue fund with a projected fund balance in 2021 of $13,215. There's $10,000 approximately in the fund now, and with new revenues get us to $13,000. Notable contracts that come out of here, or notable expenses, I should say. Critical incident planning, so this is rebuilding resources for the city and for the community that are being used right now in the middle of a critical incident, COVID-19, being able to build up those reserves and those items that would be need to be replenished for potential future incidents. Okay, municipal court diversion fees. The municipal court has the ability to engage defendants in a diversion program, and funds from those, so when someone goes through a diversion, they have to pay a fee to enter into the diversion program as opposed to entering guilty or what have you. So funds from that diversion program are also used for law enforcement schooling, training, equipment, municipal court. And so in 2021, we've got about $5,400 in the fund balance now. We get $2,000 next year. Brings that fund balance to about $7,500. Expenses out of that, we've got police equipment and a new printer for Municipal Court. Okay, the Special Highway Fund. These are proceeds of the motor vehicle fuel tax. And this is where the city expends for its road maintenance program. So when we do chip seal every year, it comes out of the Special Highway Fund. We've got $135,000 in just the Special Highway Fund budgeted for 2021. And then, as we'd said, in the general fund, we are committing $30,000 to that as well, so that we can get more streets maintained more regularly starting next year. And then special parks and recreation, funding from the local alcohol liquor tax are put towards parks and park improvements. We do have a fund balance in there right now of $31,767, or excuse me, a projected fund balance for 2021 of that amount. And we are looking at doing some improvements to the ball complex lights out there. So that concludes my presentation. I know that this was a lot to take in one sitting. I don't expect commissioners to resolve the budget tonight. This is always kind of an overwhelming meeting, but we're going to have staff and all of us available to answer any questions you might have, so that we can help commissioners make informed, educated decisions as they look at approving the FY 2021 budget. We do have 2 scheduled workshops in addition to this meeting on July 6th and July 20th. Again, if we get to the July 6th meeting and we feel like there's going to be a lot more than just that meeting, I would really encourage that we try and schedule a special meeting between July 6th and July 20th so that we can keep on that August timeline that I discussed at the outset. Because if we get through July 20th and we don't have a budget resolved, again, we're going to have more special meetings and push our timelines back and things like that. So, are there any questions on anything? It's a lot. Yes, I will send the presentation out. Again, usually what we try and do is get the budget books out to commissioners before this meeting and try and get this presentation out to commissioners before this meeting. When we push that timeline up, we were printing budget books today and I was doing the budget presentation all weekend. If you drove by the city hall, you saw my light on this weekend. So there's just a real tight turnaround for us. So even though I wish I could have gotten this all out to you sooner, this is just kind of the way it had to be today. So I do apologize, but this presentation will get sent out to you so that you can go through all the slides and obviously digest.
Well, I commend you on your presentation. It was very well done.
Thank you.
I think you went through everything as well as you could and explained things very well. I guess I would say, does anybody else who is here have anything they would wish to add?
Talkative bunch.
Yeah. Us too.
A lot of work. Good job. Everybody taking part in it, so it's a lot to do. So a lot to absorb too.
So we meet with the county on July 6th, and then after we meet with them, we go into a budget discussion, right?
Yes, those will be the 2 things on the agenda for that meeting. We'll try and keep it light other than that.
Any questions, any concerns for Andrew? Like I said, it's a lot to digest, especially for the new ones. We can go back and you can take your books and go through them and jot down questions that you have. And come back on July 6th and we tackle it again.
And I would just encourage commissioners, as you go through the budget, if you have questions, if you would like additional information, email me as soon as possible if there's some sort of report you'd like me to run, or if there's, again, I'm not sure what this expenditure is, I'm not sure what this line item is. I'd encourage you, email me as soon as possible, and I'll get back with any information you need to help you.
Any concerns, any questions, Garrett?
A lot to digest.
I'm sure that we'll have a candid conversation, at the July 6th meeting. I know that during our evaluation, we discussed some things that we wanted to address. You addressed some of them. I'm sure that, the commission will probably have some input at our next meeting, or questions or concerns that they want to address, or, anything else that you can think of, JJ?
You looking at
JJ, I looked at him.
I have no questions.
No, how about you?
I don't have anything. I'd just like to commend everybody that worked on it. They did a pretty good job, I think, and all the city employees, I think they do a pretty good job.
Okay. Nothing else? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. I'm gonna have a slice of pizza before I leave.